Well, hi. Today we're going to talk about a facet of the business of creativity, which I lovingly refer to as the award show industrial complex. Welcome to the Curiosity and Courage podcast. I'm Tim Brunell. Thank you for tuning in. Now, if you work in the business of advertising and design, interactive film, you quickly become aware of awards. We all know about the Oscars, the Emmys, the SAG Awards, and the film festival in Cannes, France, which also hosts the annual Cannes Advertising Festival. There are the Clios, the Andes, the Reggies. Various industry trade groups each host their own award show competitions. And in the realm of advertising, the Art Directors Club, D&AD, and the One Show attract a lot of attention, admiration, and some disdain. As the magazine pundit Michael Wolff put it in 2002, awards mean nothing until you are the winner. Then they become richly deserved and full of meaning. But let's be honest, there's a lot of value in submitting to, judging, and celebrating creative effort. As I note later in this episode, I couldn't have built the copywriting portfolio which got me my first job without the training and inspiration found in the heavy, carefully printed advertising awards annuals, especially those produced by the One Club for Art and Copy, as it was once known. Today's guest, Kevin Swanepoel, is the CEO and president of the One Club, which exists to support and celebrate the success of the global creative community. Kevin has been with the One Club for 27 years and CEO for the past decade, a journey which we're going to investigate. Now, the One Club has its annual Creative Week coming up May 12 through 16 in New York City. I've got a lot of links to all of that in the show notes, and I hope you're interested. Now, I first met Kevin in the late 1990s as the internet was taking hold and informing what it meant to practice advertising. As we'll learn, Kevin was at the forefront of this seismic shift. He literally brought the One Club into the digital age. When he and I spoke in early April, the One Club's legion of industry creative leaders were in the midst of judging almost 19,000 global entries submitted in dozens of categories for 2025. Everything from newspaper ads to websites, social video to experiences, PR to software and design categories. Every conceivable facet of creativity was being evaluated for potential gold, silver, bronze, and merit awards. Meanwhile, Kevin's team was busy running 7 different creative schools and launching its 5th cohort of TikTok creative training. So it was wonderful to reconnect as Kevin and his team prepare for Creative Week 2025. I began this conversation by asking Kevin how he first discovered the professional world of creativity and learned that for Kevin, creativity started as a realm where his art could help make ends meet and actually put food on the table in his home in Durban, South Africa. Here's my conversation with Kevin Swanepoel.
Yeah, it was really interesting because, I was at high school and I was thinking about becoming an architect. I was good at art, so it was really interesting because I got to about standard 7. I don't know what you call it here, but it's just standard 7, which is sort of second year in high school. And my dad, unfortunately, was sort of forced into early retirement. And as a family, we were really, really struggling. And I was pretty good at still screening. So my dad would come with me and we'd work late into the night and I'd still screen all these posters. And I have still got a whole portfolio of these posters. And then I used to basically go door to door to all the design and poster stores in South Africa, selling these artwork to really help support the family. So that was sort of the entry, me as a creative, me becoming entrepreneurial. It was a really good bonding moment with my father. And then, naturally I decided the architecture industry in South Africa was going really down because we were in depression in South Africa at the time. And so I thought, well, how else could I use my art and design skills. And so I went to graphic design college in Durban, pretty well known Durban Technicon, very good school. And I ended up sort of paying for that, airbrushing surfboards at the Safari Surf Shop, and then airbrushing motorcycles or surf vans for all my friends. So that was my two big moments of like, okay, you're gonna go into creativity, you're gonna be a creative of some sort, and then also being an entrepreneur. How do you make it
Right.
meet? How do you pay your way through college? And yeah, so that's where it all started, which is pretty cool.
But in many ways, for you, art was a survival mechanism. I mean, for you to eat, for the family to thrive, young Kevin had to create and make things that other people could be attracted to so that you could get paid to survive.
Yeah, I mean, it was really like it was gut wrenching. I'm sure for my father, because he was forced into retirement. He was, production manager in a big fertilizer plant, and things just weren't going great in South Africa at the time. So
Right.
yeah, but there's some of those memories where you, as a family, are scrounging around for bottles to return to the store that you could buy some bread and stuff to put on the table. It was a crazy moment in life, but one I would never change, not even the slightest. And I think back
Yeah.
on it really prepared me for so much in life, and the bonding I had with my dad was just incredible.
Interesting to think about art. For many people, art is an escape, it's a luxury, it's a nice thing to have. Um, but art isn't necessarily a survival mechanism per se. But you're telling me a story of, your circumstances growing up where art was in fact the means of putting bread on the table, right? And the fact that you recognized, oh, I can design things, I can technically manufacture things, I know how to use a spray gun, I know how to organize paint, and that paid the bills. You know, um, it sounds like you have a different relationship kind of growing up with art, and creativity as a tool for surviving, whereas many other people, kind of stumbled into it as a form of expression, but it wasn't necessarily something that they had to do in order to eat. So was that sort of the moment when you kind of realized that, hey, this could be my path forward for the rest of my life as a creative person?
Yeah, because it was one of those things where I didn't have any other options. My brother was at a trade school, so he was starting to be an armature winder and into the trades. So I was handy with my hands, but I always had that sort of creative thought process, and you know, uh, art came naturally to me. So that was like, okay, let me just lean into this thing that I think I'm okay at and see if it could
Yeah.
make a living. Yeah.
And who inspired you at that age? So where you were in Durban, in South Africa, what were you seeing out in the world in terms of album covers or magazines or other media? What was inspiring you at that? What were the kind of the hallmarks of inspiration for you at that point?
Think some of the biggest things, and you talk about album covers that really inspired me was really there was this little recording studio down the road from us, and when Sergeant Pepper's was released, they got like one of the very first copies of it, and like we all poured over those album covers. I distinctly remember sitting in the sound studio and hearing Sergeant Pepper's being played for the first time, and then again, when Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon was released, just those moments in time, looking at album covers. In fact, a really, really good friend of mine, school friend of mine, he had this big, big room that his parents gave him. And I went in there, we painted the Bob Marley album covers on the walls in his room. It was just so cool. So I was always doing that type of shit. It was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Wow.
and that's why I say, for me, music, I was really, really just big into, it was, Pink Floyd or Uriah Heep or Black Sabbath or, The Clash.
So you're going to school in Durban, painting motorcycles, painting surfboards. What happens after you graduate? Like what does that lead to?
Oh man, well, you need to understand, in South Africa there's conscript. So I ended up, after art school, I took a sailboat and I sailed to the island of Mauritius in the first beachcomber race, which was between Durban and Mauritius. And did that for 13 days out in the open ocean, 66-foot yacht, enjoyed that thoroughly. And then got to Mauritius, and my dad called me and he said, "Hey, sonny boy, I just got your call-up papers for the army, and in 2 weeks' time, you got to go to the army." So I literally went from, after sailing this boat to Mauritius, I flew back home and got on a train to Kimberley, which is a small little mining town in South Africa, to go to the army.
Were you able to do artistic things in that space and that time?
My story is a little crazy. So in the army, you had to do 2 years. And then once you completed your 2 years service, then you had to go to do army camps every year. And it could be a month or 3 months, depending on the situation. Or you could do special forces for 3 years, and then you wouldn't have to do camps after that. So that's a bit of a fitness freak. So I decided, okay, I'm going to join the special forces. So I went and did selection, and thankfully I was good enough, and I made the cut. From 1,300 people, 13 were selected, so that was pretty cool. And so I did that for 3 years.
And then after special forces, you're done with the military. And how does your career evolve from there?
So I went back, and I had a very short term before I jumped on that sailboat and sailed to Mauritius. I worked at an ad agency called Heath Donahue in Durban. And so I came back and I said, "Hey guys, I'm back," and they said, "Yeah, well, we've just laid off a whole lot of people," because at that stage it was the really early 80s, and yeah, there was a deep recession in South Africa. So they said, "Well, sorry, we've got nothing for you." And again, it was that sort of entrepreneurial spirit and said, like, "Okay, well, I know I can do artwork." And so I moved my dad's car at the garage, and in his garage, I set up a drawing board and started, just doing some basic design work for local companies. And I was very, very fortunate. I had a friend who owned a gym manufacturing company, and he was going to do this exhibition at an Expo 85. And he said, "Would you just draw me up some plans? Because I have to submit plans for what the look of the stand is going to be, and take them in and get them approved." And I was standing in this line with a set of plans that I'd drawn, and I heard two guys in front of me talk, and they said, like, "Man, somebody's going to make a shit ton of money." So I tapped the guy on the shoulder and I said to him, like, "Hey, I would like to make a shit ton of money. Like, what are you talking about?" The guy says, "No, there is this tender out to paint the walls of the expo. And it's going to be the largest mural at that stage. They're wanting to get into the Guinness Book of Records. And it's out for bid. And there's only one person that's bid on it." I said, "Oh, really?" So I said, "You wouldn't happen to know what the bid was?" And they did. And they did share that with me. And so naturally, I said, like, okay, I've got up to the front line, submitted the plans, and I said, "Oh, I'd like to put in a bid for this tender to paint the exterior of the walls." And so I did. I submitted a competitive bid, and the person who made the decision was the person who had also put in the other bid, and he happened to be my lecturer from college. And
Wow.
And I met with him and I said, like, "You cannot deny that I have the ability to do this." And he's,
Right.
"No, you can do this. You can get it done." And I won the bid. So I actually hired my entire class from art school. And we would set up, at that stage, it was overhead projectors. And so there were all these there was a competition where all these high school students, or not high school, school students, I don't remember what class they were from, but they submitted these drawings, and then these drawings would be put onto the exterior walls, and then the sponsor was Plascon Paints. And so we would set up these overhead projectors with the drawings that we had outlined, project them at night onto the walls, and we'd sit there with black markers outlining what had to be painted. And then one of our team would come along with this sort of tray of colors and put a dash of blue or yellow or red or whatever the color that it needs to be painted within the lines. These teams of painters come the next day and just paint. So anyway, it was remarkable. It never ended up getting into the Guinness Book of Records because there was a road that they could not connect the two. And so it never ended up being that. But it was remarkable because, the relationship I had with all my college friends, that was so good. We paid them, they did well out of it. And I had enough money, which I was, again, fortunate enough to be at a printer, doing some printing work. And he let me know that there was this company in Johannesburg that was closing their doors because the person was immigrating to Australia. And, um, and he was like depressed because it was a very, very big client of theirs. And they bought lots of work. And I said to him, well, do you think I could buy the equipment? And he said, well, let me chat to her because maybe you can just take over the whole book. And so it was good for him because I bought out this company in Johannesburg. She was going to just shut it down. And I basically ordered for the cost of the equipment, which was, cameras and stuff like that. And yeah, so I took over this business in Johannesburg, which was a functioning business. One of their largest clients was this PR company, and they did all the work for the local TV station, which was then Mnet. So I ended up literally going from Durban. I had enough money to buy this, and I moved to Johannesburg within 2 weeks and started a business. It was crazy.
Wow. So from giant murals to that now running a business that was doing, what was the work that you were doing?
It was all, design work, which was brochures, annual reports, packaging, you name it, for all these clients for this PR company. And
Right.
it was really great. We ran the agency there for 13 years, actually. I ran, um, it was called Active Art. And then after 13 years, it grew fairly large. And then I decided to take on a partner, and I took on a partner for 6 months. We changed the name to Creative and Strategic. And I woke up one morning and my partner didn't show up for work. And then I checked the bank account, and the bank account was pretty much zero. And he had literally, abs- you know, absconded with all the money we had. And went overseas. It was just like I built this company up for 13 years, and it just
Yeah.
we ended up. It was terrible.
Devastating.
It was crazy because I actually went
Yeah.
into severe depression. Um,
Yeah.
we just had
No doubt.
our first child. My first child was born, and we literally sold our beautiful home that we had. We ran the business from that home. We sold it. We moved into a flat just to have my first child. And yeah, I was
Yeah.
really depressed, man. I was broken, man. And thankfully, I had an incredible wife who literally picked me up, dusted me off, marched me into somebody had an ad that they needed, creative to work on an account of theirs. And I went in there and got back on my feet again. But
Yeah.
it was pretty tough. Like I can't
Yeah.
say, from really doing so well to suddenly having nothing. Um,
Right.
and then it was interesting because I went to this company and I was working for them. And in that time, Apple Computer was doing pretty well in South Africa, and they we were their first client, to first agency client. But let me phrase it that way. We were the first agency to put in a whole bank of Apple Macs and printers and you name it.
Mm.
And then the the general manager of Apple at the time reached out to me and said, "Hey, you know, you were the first to do it. You like really tech savvy, and would you come and work for Apple and sell Macs to agencies and sub-Sahara?" So
Right.
I ended up leaving this little agency, and I went and worked for Apple. So it was a pretty wild times. It was great. I spent a good um, 2.5 years at Apple, and that's when I met Mary Warlick, who was the CEO of the One Club. And,
Ah.
and what was interesting there is that Apple had sponsored the One Show exhibition in South Africa, and the general manager had asked this intern to take care of the exhibition in Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town, and things weren't going that well. And Mary, who was the CEO at the time, and just lost her mind, threw toys out the cart, and the Apple GM asked me, "Hey, you're a fixer. Just fix this. Just make it right." Yeah. So I did that, and at the time, I was coding in Macromedia Director, and that was before it was an Adobe product, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. And
Right.
I saw the beautiful One Show annual, and I said, "You know what? You need to have a CD-ROM in here with the TV commercials, because they would just have three pictures of each of
Right.
three pictures of the commercial." So I created a CD-ROM. This was even before DVDs, and I sent it to Mary, and she says, "Oh my God, this is great. We'll put it in the annual. How much?"
What year was that?
So that would have been in about 95.
Kevin, I think I have that annual. I think I have that down here somewhere.
You might well.
What an incredible journey to go from painting surfboards to running an agency, feast and famine, and then all of a sudden you're working for Apple, helping evangelize a new approach to creativity across a continent, right? And then that somehow puts you in contact with Mary, the incredible legendary Mary Warlick,
Yeah.
right? So
Crazy.
is that what brought you to New York?
Yeah. So what actually happened then was, so I did the first CD-ROM, and then I pitched Mary this idea. I said, "You know what? I'm working on this thing called the internet, and there's going to be advertising in it." And
You might have heard of it.
yeah, in fact, not many people were talking about it then.
Right.
And I said, "Look, you should do One Show Interactive." And I've put together this whole proposal, and I sent it to Mary, and they had a board meeting one summer, and it was a very lightly attended board meeting that barely had a quorum. And anyway, they approved doing One Show Interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you better ask this guy to come and run it, because like we have no idea what it is and what it's going to be. And since when I actually left South Africa, and I got to the US in 96. So that was November 96. I started the One Club, started the first interactive award show.
I'm working on this thing called the internet. It's incredible to think back just 20 years or less. The world of creativity was joyous, inventive, profound, and all of a sudden, Kevin Swanepoel, a former surfboard painter who wound up selling Apple Mac computers to ad agencies, winds up inventing One Show Interactive to help celebrate and evangelize this new form of creativity which was emerging. Kevin created an entirely new branch of a 100-year-old industry. But maybe it's less of a surprise when you look back at Kevin's roots, his motivations to feed his family, to pay for school, to survive setbacks. You can appreciate Kevin's entrepreneurial chutzpah, his roots in graphic design. Kevin asks important questions, seeks out important challenges like that Expo mural project. He didn't have to pitch Mary Warlick on producing a CD-ROM of all of the TV commercials in the one show. He saw something missing, something that others would benefit from experiencing. It can be easy to look at long-established organizations like the One Club and make assumptions about their heritage. And then you meet Kevin and you realize there's an art form in nurturing and evolving the business itself. Now, in the second half, we start off where I first met Kevin, when the team I was a part of at Arnold Worldwide produced a website for Volkswagen to promote and integrate the launch of the new Beetle Turbo. We created a Flash-based website called Turbonium.com, and we paid to enter the website in the award competition that Kevin had founded. Now, in the interview, I got my dates mixed up. You'll hear me insist that we entered Turbonium in the year 1998, but actually, it says right here that we entered it in the 2000 One Show Interactive, the third such competition. We also discuss the infusion of AI into both the Art Directors Club competition and the One Show competitions for 2025. Kevin's got some great insights around AI. And we also take a quick step back into the history of the One Club and the story of George Lois and the founding of a central community to recognize and celebrate all things creativity. Here's the second half of my conversation with One Club CEO, Kevin Swanepoel. We entered Turbonium, I
Yes.
think, into 1998.
Right.
I think it was the second year. And I remember we went down and lo and behold, won a couple of gold pencils, and then all of a sudden, Best of Show goes to VW and Turbonium. And it was just, it's one of those moments where there were 5 or 6 of us
Yeah.
making an idea late at night, in an ad agency and, in a new medium that most people just did not understand. We built a thing. It was alive in the world, but yet, most of the folks working at Arnold in the agency business that at that time did not understand the internet. In fact, I remember calling Ron Lawner that night to say, Ron, we won Best of Show. And he said, this is great news. This is the first time the agency had ever won Best of Show for anything.
Yeah.
And he was thrilled with that. But at that time, I do remember coming back and there were some folks who said, well, it's true. Yes, you did win Best of Show, but only in interactive. Right? Because there was that period where you had the tug, the war between what is, original or traditional creative and what is interactive creative.
Oh my God. I've fought that battle for 10 years, trying to convince agencies that, hey, this is a real thing. It's not going to go away. The genie is out the bottle. And for, we used to have websites and an exhibition. I think you guys also exhibited at that. And, it was such a great period. And in fact, the beauty is looking right now, we are in the exact same period in time.
Yes. Yep.
AI, what's happening with AI, we are exactly in the same period of time with this new technology. And, we've seen it all. We saw the web, and then there was social, and then there was mobile, and then it's suddenly streaming. Do you remember the times when BMW films? So this was classic. In 2000, the One Show has a policy of like, if something is great, you have to award it. Okay.
Mhm.
BMW films came along, and lo and behold, it didn't fit the category outlines, which says it had to be 2 minutes or less. And
Right.
we played this thing to the judges, and everybody said, like, Jesus, this is the best thing we've seen in the longest period. We should be awarding this. And then somebody said, oh, yeah, but the rules say it has to be, less than 2 minutes. And we got together and we said, like, well, you, the jury, you should make the decision. Should we actually change the rules because our rules are outdated and we're not rewarding the best thing that is out there? And that they changed the rules. We awarded it. It became best of show that year.
Right.
And that year, the award show in the south of France disqualified it because it didn't meet the criteria. I'm just one of these people who really pushes the boundaries and the limits, especially around new technology. And in fact, yesterday we just did. I I started the Art Directors Awards, ADC Awards last year. I put in an AI category, and then I had to get board approval to do it for the one show. So I wanted to do a whole separate show for AI, and the board turned around and said, "No, no, no, no." So we did the category. I'm still fighting that good fight, but yeah, yesterday we judged the first year's AI discipline, and the jury was made up of some of those old legacy people way back in the early digital age were on the jury, because they're all tinkering with it. I'm a firm believer is that you've got to be learning all the time, and right now, they are really you've got to embrace this new technology. You've got to figure it out. You've got to putter with it. And who knows where it'll go, but you just have to be playing with it. Like you guys played with the web and the first e-commerce store for Turbonium to sell a car online.
Right. Exactly. It's such a funny thing how uh, creative people oftentimes will be the most resistant to change through the lens of technology. And I find that the hesitation or concerns that are prohibiting the embrace of AI, they're somewhat comical when you consider we had the same reactions to social or the same reactions to the internet when those technologies first arrived, you know? I'm curious with your judging, um, what was the overarching sentiment of kind of this first round or this first review of AI creativity? What were people thinking in general?
I think some of the things, and it goes back to the exact same discussions that we we're having in the early days of One Show Interactive, was how do you not be seduced by the technology or the tool? What are we judging for? What's the foundations of what we're judging for? And one could be innovation, but one, it has to be a good idea. One show is about ideas, is about solving business problems. It's not about this shiny little object called technology, and it's, ooh, look, they did this with this technology. That can't be what you're looking at. You've got to be like, okay, what is the problem we're solving for? And how did AI help with the solution? And did it help in a way that it couldn't have been done before AI? You know? And there was some really interesting debates because there were some pieces of work that were brilliant pieces of work, but some of the jury felt, well, this could have been done, before AI with other tools, just
Right.
so there's nothing special here. I think the things that really stood out was, holy shit, you could never have solved this problem before AI.
And I think that's the realization that we need to have in this moment. What are the creative challenges that can only be solved because of AI? AI, what is it that AI is unlocking, right? Not what is AI repeating, as you noted, oh, this is an idea that you could have done before AI. But what sort of category or quality of idea is AI enabling that could not have been done before? I'm curious, let's talk a little bit about your history with the One Club, right?
Yeah.
And how old is the One Club? Can you
So the one,
give us a brief history?
it's around 54 years old.
Okay.
So 53, 54 years old, because it was a big transition when the One Club came about when George Lois, legendary creative, got together with a couple of other people, and there were just too many award shows. And they said, like, you know what? Why don't we just come together and create the one show. And they did. And so the pencil, George Lewis created that, which is the beautiful double-sided pencil, and that
Yes.
shows the relationship between an art director and a writer working together on an idea.
Hmm.
And so that was fantastic. And then naturally, the Art Directors Club, which was the biggest club at the time, who joined this group, pulled out because they said, "Look, we've been all the entries, or we've been most of the entries. We deserve most of the money," and they weren't happy, so they pulled away. Um, George Lewis said, "No, the one show stands for something specific, and we should continue it." So that was 1973. So anyway, we 70 odd years, 50 odd years old. Um, then fast forward. Obviously, I was the fourth um, staff member at the one club at the time. Worked my way up, became president. Then became CEO. And the first thing I did when I became CEO was I went and acquired the Art Directors Club. So we bought the one club and the Art Directors Club back together.
Mm.
And so the Art Directors Club is 104 years old this year.
Mm.
It
Wow.
is it is the first. It was the very, very first award show for commercial art, so that commercial art could be seen in the same light as regular art in a museum.
Right.
Um, then a couple of years later, I acquired the Talk Directors Club because that was a niche club, also now 75 years old, but very specific creative community focusing on typography. And
Right.
then 2 years ago, I acquired the Art Directors Club of Europe. So, I'm trying to build together this group of nonprofits that have got a similar mission and purpose to really celebrate and support the global creative community.
And it's a wonderful mission. I think about, the range of educational endeavors that you all have instigated and supported and fueled in Asia and here in the Midwest and in New York. And I know certainly, as a writer coming up, I mean, I got my degree in music, and I came back to Minneapolis, and a neighbor handed me 5 years worth of one show annuals and said, "I want you to look at these." This is an individual who worked at Fallon. And we had this conversation, kind of a Socratic conversation about what is a good idea. And in looking through the annuals, because there's such a range, it allowed for a conversation to be had that helped me understand, oh, what do I think is a good idea, right? In this rich tapestry of evaluated work. And then it leads to certain sort of exercises when you're building a portfolio to say, well, why don't you first be the judge of the judging? So you have 10 post-it notes, pick your 10 favorite ads in the whatever annual you're holding. And then you have to kind of ask yourself, well, what is it about these 10 ads that I've selected that I think are of merit? What's the consistency there? And therefore, what can I, as a creative person, discern about how I might go about making the 11th ad, right? If these are the 10 ads that I've curated, how might that fuel my work, the 11th ad? And so, growing up as a writer and as a conceptual person, I found myself, especially as a writer and then becoming a creative director, turning again and again we would spend hours in the various agencies thumbing through one show annuals, communication arts annuals, D&AD annuals to try to learn, to try to understand what are the hallmarks, the constructs, the mechanisms, the strategies that lead to remarkable work. In your years, from again painting surfboards to running an agency on your own to helping sell Apple computers to now running this large global creative organization, you've worked alongside all sorts of writers and strategists and technologists and designers and art directors. What are the habits or the skills that kind of define outstanding creative people? What if you had to what are the hallmarks of a truly remarkable creative person?
I really think it's somebody who is internally and completely inquisitive. Um, well, you know what it is. It's as a creative, you share what you've learned in life, and it's just part of your being. So somebody who's out there reading, going to movies, experiencing life, and then sharing those stories.
Mhm.
If you are not inquisitive, and I have to add to that, you've got to be learning constantly, and and that's been my approach. When the internet came along, I was coding. When social and mobile came along, I'd had every social app that you could have. I was adopted iPhone from iPhone one, and when AIs come about, I've been programming my own GPTs and all that type
Yeah.
in it. You know, if you are not an inquisitive person who's constantly learning, you're just going backwards. You know.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And is that a global truism? Because you've certainly in your work been all over the world in terms of creativity. Is that true around the world?
I think creativity globally will look at sort of the universal truths, whether it be emotion and storytelling,
Hmm.
and boldness. But the contexts, what makes the global sort of um, languages different. In other words, think about this. When you have a look at humor in the US, it's very, very, very different to Thai humor. And so Thailand is incredibly well renowned for its great humor. But globally, we understand humor is a great means to telling a story.
Hmm.
But then when you go into the sort of nuances of different areas, whether it be, as I say, Japan or Thailand or US or Brazil, that humor is different. So I think it's just really interesting for me, when you're looking at it on a global stage, is to probably judge less, appreciate the nuances, and certainly like the local ideas that come from um, you know just the different cultures that you're in.
How do you in the judging so right now you're in the midst of all of the judging related to the one show. So let's back up a little bit. How many entries total were submitted for this current round of the one show?
So we're a little under 19,000 this year. We're slightly soft year, but yeah, when you have a look at 19,000 pieces of work,
So and that's 19,000 print ads, brochures, TV spots, experiential.
everything, radio, direct, yeah, social media, mobile, yeah.
Right. And and even to get a little bit more technical, so 19,000, how do you assemble the judges to kind of process through that volume of work to kind of distill it down? What's the process?
So the process has changed through the years. Going back to the early years, we used to only have 12 judges. That was it. 12 judges judged everything. And then when we started One Show Interactive, they had their own 12. When we started One Show Design, they had their own 12.
Yeah,
So the jury got bigger as the categories and disciplines expanded. Um,
exactly.
right now, we've got 26 disciplines
Mm,
because there's PR and all those types of things,
right.
creative effectiveness, etc. And so each discipline has its own jury of 12 judges because we've done
Mhm.
analysis and 12 people give you about the best um, distribution of scores that you can get. And then, so we have about 250 judges in total for the one show.
Mm, yeah.
And we we align them roughly with the number of entries. So we get 40% of the entries come from the US. So roughly
Mhm.
40% of the judges are from the US. And 60% of the work comes from the global market. So 60% of the judges are global.
Right.
We really and truly believe in diversity. So one, uh, and gender equality. So our juries, we've committed to being as close to 50-50 as we can be. There are some little exceptions, but generally there'll be 50-50 split of gender on our juries, and then we'll distribute it. We need to have people who make up big agencies, small agencies, independent, freelancers, and specialists. So, if you're talking about, let's say, film craft, there should be an editor in there, there should be a director in there. So it just depends on the actual discipline that they're judging, is the makeup of that jury. Obviously, PR has to have some PR specialists in it and strategy.
Right.
So we very carefully select the specialists and add them to the juries. But each discipline, their jury consists of about 12 people.
And then they go through their, of the 19,000, there's a certain amount are television, certain amount are PR, certain amount are et cetera. And they distill them down. Are they ultimately picking the gold and best of show in their categories, or does it route up to the board?
No, no, they will pick up they'll have a gold, silver, bronze, and merit, and then they'll pick the best of discipline. And then at the end of the day, the entire 250 people will look at all the best of disciplines and determine the best of show. So, if you think of a best of discipline as the equivalent of like a Grand Prix, then we have one best in show, which is the best of the best.
Which could be it could be craft, it could be PR, it could be advertising.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's different every year. How do you, so you mentioned humor, and that there's Thai humor and, German humor. Is there German humor and American humor?
No, totally. This is an international broadcast.
Right. How do they reconcile those sort of global differences? If you've got a commercial or something is being displayed, and the Thai judge is just laughing their ass off, and the American judge is confused. Like, how do you reconcile the differences in culture?
Yeah, so that's really why it's so important to have this diverse jury of people from different cultures, so that the cultural nuances can be explained. If there is a judge in the jury, and we certainly do make sure that there are a couple of those outlier judges, especially from Thailand, in the film jury, because they do great film, they do great humor, and quite often it needs to be explained. So yeah, we really look to that, and we leave it up to the judges to really pinpoint the nuances, the different cultural nuances that there are within the work.
When you think of 250 judges, and you've been soliciting and curating judges all of these years, what makes an individual an effective judge of creativity?
I think the characteristics of a great judge is somebody who can literally distill their thought process and articulate it really well. When we brief the judges, I think the big thing that we let them know is think, carefully before opening your mouth about how you speak about the work. And speak about the work as if you like your creative director speaking to one of your creatives to really explain maybe how they could have done something better, or maybe improved upon it, or yeah, I think it's somebody who really is empathetic with the work, that looks for the good in the work rather than looks for what's bad in the work, and talks up those really good points and qualities. Because we do discussions in the final round, and so there's a lot of time where you're judging work and you're giving it a score, either a gold, silver, bronze, or whatever it might be. But then when it comes to the discussion rounds, that work's been through 3 rounds of judgings. There has to be something good about the work.
Right.
And don't talk work down, but rather look for the really good work and talk work up rather than talk work down.
And as I understand it too, one of the other things that you've nurtured and developed over the years is Creativity Week there in New York City. Can you talk a little bit about how that came to be, and what will transpire? What's its purpose, and what will transpire this year?
Yeah, so with in 2008, we started Creative Week, and that was when all the award shows came together. So we had, One Show Interactive, One Show Design, the One Show on the Friday night. Right now, we've brought in the Art Directors Awards, we've brought in the Type Directors Awards. So we've got the TDC exhibition, which takes place in a gallery. We have the Art Directors Awards on the Wednesday night. We've got Young Ones, which is the most incredible competition for young creatives, and it has exploded. In the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 years, Jenna, who is leading the team there, who does an incredible job in getting briefs for young creatives to work on. And so that happens on the Monday night. And then we do something very special called the Executive Creative Summit. And this is an invitation only event where we reach out to all the founders, partners, C suite, and agencies to come together and to really have a closed door discussion. There's no recording, there's no social media, no pictures taken. And we have real in depth discussions about the business of running the business. And this year, it's going to be about how do we, as an agency or a brand, effectively implement an AI strategy. And so we've got some incredible speakers, like Matthew from Google DeepMind. We've got people from Runway speaking, and we're going to be actually giving a real hands-on approach to how to effectively adopt an AI strategy in your agency or your brand and how to implement that. And so this is not just theory, but it's a real hands-on, basically, guide to how to get it done. Uh,
Right.
and then we added some fun to this thing. And so I started this thing called the AI Challenge, and that's going to take place on the Thursday night, where it's going to be almost like a basketball bracket where we get 16 of the hottest AI creators,
Mm.
pit them against each other in a bracket where they'll pit one against each other, and then the person who advances goes on to the next. And so we've got the final two, and they'll be given a 10-minute brief, and they'll be like, pick out of a fishbowl what the brief is. You've got 10 minutes to create, and everybody else will be having a glass of wine. There'll be a DJ spinning some songs, and these creators are going to be going head to head.
And using various AI tools, so ChatGPT to Runway to
You bring your computer loaded with whatever you want, and you've got 10 minutes to prove your cred.
I'm really impressed and grateful that you've continued to bring such positive energy to our community as creative people, to think about all of the benefits that young filmmakers and writers and art directors kind of like when they stumble into and discover the One Club or the Art Directors Club or the Type Directors Club, and they discover the history of work that you've helped sustain, and it helps advance this calling that we have, collectively. And so thank you for in your continued advocating for and advancing the industry that we work in.
I think there's two little things I'd like to end with, because I know we're running out of time here. But during COVID, we started up something called One School, and it's the only free portfolio school for Black creatives. We now have 5 schools. We've got 4 in the US and 1 in London. And then just after that, we did a partnership with TikTok, trying to find young creators who are on the TikTok platform. And how do we engage with them? How do we train them to become creators in an agency? And so these 2 programs I'm incredibly proud of, that we've got now 7 schools running. We've trained over 300 Black creators who are working in the industry. We've got, I think this is our 5th cohort from the TikTok One Creator Lab, who are in the industry now as well. We are making such groundbreaking waves in diversity, not just, cultural diversity, you name it, across the board. Gender diversity, we're bringing women into leadership roles. So I'm just super excited on where we are and the changes that we are helping make happen in this industry, because we all know that a diverse industry is a better industry.
Thank you, Kevin. What a life that guy has lived, from airbrushing surfboards to running a global creativity organization. Folks, I've got many links for you in the show notes and on the episode website on Substack. The One Club's Creative Week is coming fast, May 12 through 16 in New York City. You can explore all of the myriad details, competitions, educational opportunities, and news at oneclub.org. And if this episode inspired you, please share a link with just one other person. That's all I ask. Word of mouth is how Curiosity plus Courage will spread. And if this is your first episode, check out the roster of previously recorded interviews. I've had scintillating conversations with agency creative leaders like Dave Weist, TikTok pundit Ashley Rutstein, the novelist Jane Roper, the musician and creative technologist Peter Ducharme, and meditation guru James Brown. Subscribe to Curiosity Plus Courage on all the major platforms, and please keep being awesome. You can do that, can't you?